Sairam, brothers and sisters. Sairam. My humble salutations at this divine lotus feet. Thank you everyone for coming for this special satsang at a very, very short notice. We just came to know about Brother John will be here for till tomorrow. We don't know when, if this program is going to be possible. So I guess it's all thanks to Brother Rajan Ghayal for coordinating this event. I just want to give a brief background of Brother John. Mr. John Behner is a Sai leader from El Salvador. He came to Swami in 1979 and had very many personal interactions and experiences. He is currently serving as the Zonal Chair of Zone 2, Latin and South American countries. He is a member of Prashanti Nilayam Hospitality Committee and International Disaster Relief Committee. He has been coordinating the Christmas celebrations in Prashanti Nilayam for over a decade. And he has been a Sai devotee for several decades. We would like to invite Brother John to come and share his experiences with all of us. Thank you.
Sai Ram. I offer my love and my pranams at Bhagavan's lotus feet. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I hope that what we can share tonight will be benefit to each and every one. Of the questions that all of us have at one time or another is, who really is Satya Sai Baba? And of course, Sai has told us that all of the wise men and all of the scientists and all of the academics in the world could try to discover his reality and investigate him for thousands of years, and they'd never really know who he was. But occasionally we've received these little atisbos, or I don't know how you say in English, little glimpses of his grandeur. One time Kasturi, and Kasturi told us this, and he said one time he'd asked Swami about, he said he'd like to know about the universe, and would Swami tell him about the universe? And so I said, oh yes, I'll tell you. And Kasturi thought maybe he would call him in the afternoon and give him some insight, but he didn't talk to him that afternoon. And even 3, 4, 5 days went by and Baba didn't say anything to him, and he sort of thought that Swami had forgotten about his question. And then one night he was asleep, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and he felt somebody jiggling his foot, and he woke up, and Swami had come to his room, and he said, "Hey Kasturi, I thought you wanted to know about the universe." And Kasturi was, oh, I'm sleeping, Swami. Baba says, "Get up, get dressed, come with me." And so Kasturi got up, and they went to Swami's room, and up to Swami's room, and then they went out onto the balcony. And when Swami opened the doors out onto the balcony, and they went out there, that whole area with the sand in front of the balcony was filled with gods and demagogues with their hands together folded. And Swami said to Kasturi, he said, every galaxy has its own god, and they've all come here for my darshan. Oh my God, who is Satya Sai? That all the gods would come for his darshan. Now, in 1977, Ananda Mayi Ma who was a very well-known saint in North India, she had come to Whitefield, believe it or not. And his luck was leaving the ashram to go back to, he was leaving Sai Baba's ashram to go back to Bangalore to his hotel. And he saw a whole bunch of cars parked on the side of the road. And he asked the taxi driver, you know, well, what's all this about? And he said, well, Anandamayi Ma is visiting a house here, somebody's house there in Whitefield. And so his luck says, stop, and he went inside. And he saw Anandamayi Ma. And we don't really know if she, because she was so close to physically to where Sai Baba was, if she actually had a meeting with Baba or something. But over the years, her devotees had asked her, who is Satya Sai? And she would never answer, she never said anything. But apparently, at this time, she was over 90 years old when this happened in 1977. And they asked her then, because, I guess because she was so close to where Baba was, again they asked her, who is Sai Baba? And she said, I'm going to answer this question only once. She said, Satya Sai Baba is a divine being, the likes of whom you will not see again on the earth for over 6,000 years. She said 60 siglos, 6,000 years. And that's all she said. Now, there was several people that have reported to me and told me personally that they've seen Babaji in the ashram. You remember one of the students that was pushing Swami's wheelchair, the last ones, he's a boy from, his parents his mother was Spanish and his father was from Colombia, Diego. And his father told me, Ruben, told me that one day Swami was in the wheelchair and they were pushing him out for darshan. And Swami said to them, Babaji has come and he's here for my darshan. He's out there in the hall, but nobody will recognize him. And then I mentioned that to a friend of mine who was an ex-student. And he said, oh yes, he says, when I was a student here, we saw Babaji several times. And he would go up by the meditation tree. Now, here's a Siddha Purusha, who is, we know he's over 1,800 years old, Babaji. We know his parents were. And he's appeared to many people. Apparently he has an ashram in the north. He's got a golden body, he's 25 years old. And he's coming for Sai Baba's darshan. So think for a minute about really how tremendous the manifestation of Satya Sai is. You know, there are many avatars, but Sai Baba says that there's two kinds of avatars. The avatar who's a descent, who comes with all his powers like Rama and Krishna and this Satya Sai. And then there's the ascents, like Jesus, like Buddha, who are, obviously they come, they have a mission also. And so here's Satya Sai, who has manifested in our lives and has created this tremendous opportunity for us to help others and to carry on with what he started, and hopefully at some point will become realized, maybe when we leave our bodies and we won't have to come back, which was always Rosie's wish, and she would always tell Swami, I don't want to come back again, Swami. And then the people that also were doubting, and then they got these tremendous opportunities to discover who he was. Rosie and I one time in Prashanti, we met a woman who was a professional singer, or had been a professional singer. Her name was Parvati Khan. And Parvati at one time, some of you older people might remember her, was one of the top pop singers, or jazz, I don't know what you call it, jazz or pop, or what it was at that time. But she had sung at the White House in the US for President Bush and President Clinton. So I mean, she wasn't just any old singer. And she was working for the campaign for Rajiv Gandhi when he was assassinated. And I think at that time she was probably about 25 years old. And she was right at the height of her career as a singer. And so we met her in Prashanti, and she was not very much a Baba devotee. She was very doubtful. But she told us that when Rajiv was assassinated, that she had decided to give up her career. And she was just going to dedicate her life to singing in jails and in temples. She would go to Shirdi and sing, for instance, and in the jail she would sing. But no more professional, no more trying to make money with her music. And so, one time I was invited to speak at Dharma Kshetra when they were doing it was after one of these diploma courses in human values. And so I told Dr. Petri, I said, you know, it'd be nice to have some music too for the closing ceremony. And I said, why don't you invite Parvati Khan, because she lives here in Mumbai. And he was in agreement, and talked to Indula Shah, and he was in agreement, and KK, and some other directives from Dharma Kshetra. And so they invited Parvati over, and she sang in Dharma Kshetra beautifully. And, but she was still very doubtful about Swami being divine, being God. And then when we were in Prashanti and we'd heard that Swami was going to Mumbai, he was going to visit Mumbai, and Parvati called me and she said, I want to sing for Swami. And I said, oh, hey, wait a minute, lady. You know, when Swami goes to Mumbai, his program has been made up, you know, 6 months in advance, and all the top singers want to go and sing. And I don't think you've got a ghost of a chance to be able to sing for him with such short notice. No, she says, I'm going to go to Dharma Kshetra and I'm going to talk to them, and somehow I'll get on the program. Well, she goes to Dharma Kshetra, and her name Parvati Khan. She's married to a Muslim, and so that's the first strike against her. Second strike, she's a woman. And she goes into Dharma Kshetra and she said she wanted to sing for Swami, and they said, oh, there's the door over there, you know, goodbye. And so then she told me, she says, I'm never in my life going to put my foot again in Dharma Kshetra. Those people, they don't know anything about Sai Baba's teachings, and they treated me like I was the scum of the earth. But the day that Swami's plane landed in Mumbai, a messenger arrived at the door of Parvati Khan's apartment in Bandstand in Mumbai. And the messenger said, here's 3 passes, VIP pass for Dharma Kshetra for Swami's darshan. So, wow, who knows how the messenger knew where to go? Must have been Baba in person. And so she took her husband and her son, and they went to Dharma Kshetra. And they got the first row, nice place, and Swami passed in front. They saw him and everything, no problem. He didn't say anything to her. And then, the next day, Parvati was going to, or excuse me, Baba was going to the home minister's house. He's a devotee. And so Parvati, she had her pass, so she went too. And she goes in and sits with the ladies. And the Swami comes in, he sits down in a chair, and he looks over at Parvati and he says, sing. And so she said, well, she sang one song and she tied up, she couldn't sing anymore. She just fell at his feet. And then she said, "Oh, Swami, please come to my home." And then she remembered that there was a garland. Oh, Swami said to her, "I'm already there." And then she remembered there was a garland in her home that had been growing every day, and it was getting longer and longer. And then she called me again and she said, "Sai Baba is God." I believe truly he's God. And when you know all these different experiences that have happened, how he's transformed. Now, you can imagine when somebody becomes a devotee of Sai Baba, one of the first things that you want is that all of your family members also become devotees, or at least they know about Sai and so on. I have two sisters. They're younger than I am, but of course when we went to see Baba and got involved in becoming his devotees, I was telling them about Baba, I was sending them books, I was doing everything in my power to convince them that they should come to India and see him. But they didn't take the bait. Until after about 20 years, my sister, one of my sisters, let me know that she would like to go to India. And this particular sister had been like a hippie, and she had lived in different places, never really had a good job. She lived in Kodiak, Alaska at one point for a number of years, and in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and she'd worked as a waitress. She'd worked in in a little shop selling things for computers and that kind of stuff. She never had anything. She was still a hippie. But anyway, she's now 57 years old and she wants to go see Sai Baba. And so she had to quit her job, obviously, to go to India because she was going to go for a month and they wouldn't give her a month off when you're working in menial jobs. But anyway, she quit and she came to India with us. And we had 2 interviews with Swami during that time that she was there. And the second interview, Swami told her, he said, "You don't have to worry about anything. I'm taking care of everything. I'm taking care of your whole life. You'll be very, very happy that I'm looking after you." Well, she goes back. She's living in Texas, 57 years old. And what happened? Within 2 weeks, she got a job working for the pension fund of the state, 11 employees, no boss because the legislature is the boss of the employees. She got 4 raises in her first year. She bought a house, never had a house in her life. She bought a new car. They told her when they hired her, they said, when you get to be 65 and you retire, you'll have full pension, full health and welfare. And so then they elected her the vice president of the Sai Center there in Austin, and she started a program of giving books to the prisons. And people would donate books, and then she'd put a nice cover on them and the side books. And they had a real good program. It's something you might think about here also, because it's a very important, for Westerners, the books are so important because that's how most of us discovered who Sai Baba was. And so here was a person who was a good person, my sister, but she was just drifting through life without any meaning. And then all of a sudden Sai comes into her life and he gives the material needs, he covers the material needs so that she can start doing service, so that she can start doing sadhana, so that she can concentrate on the spiritual and put meaning into her life. And of course now she's retired and she's been to India several times and had other interviews with Swami and other experiences. And her life is complete, her life is beautiful. And this is, I guess, a typical story really if you stop and look at what happened to each one of us, and how Swami has, when he's come into our lives, how he's transformed these lives into meaningful lives in which we're able to help other people. Now, you'll forgive me if this is kind of a smorgasbord tonight, because I shared a lot of stories the last couple of days, and I try not to repeat them. One of the basic teachings of Sai Baba has been that he doesn't have any intermediaries, that he wants his relationship with each one of us to be heart to heart. And I learned this the hard way. One year we were in Bangalore in Whitefield, and there were a rumor going around that Swami was going to leave for Kodaikanal on such and such a date. And so in those days he would take the Indian Airlines flight from Bangalore to Madurai, and then from there by car he would go up the hill to Kodi. And so based on this rumor, I went and I bought a ticket on the Indian Airlines flight into Madurai. And goal, I hit the right day and the right flight. And so when we boarded the plane, then Swami got on last, and he was just sitting about 5 rows behind me. And I was seated next to an engineer from Bangalore. And when Baba got on the plane, the engineer said, "Oh," he said, "is that the God man?" I said, "Yeah, that's Satya Sai Baba." And he said, "Oh, wow." And he got up and he went back and he touched his feet and came back and sat down. He was really very emotional. And so we started talking about Sai. And the plane took off, and we hadn't gone too far. And the fellow, he asked me, he said, if I had a picture of Sai Baba, does he want to put one on his altar? And just by chance, I happened to have an 8 by 10 photo of Baba, and so I gave it to him. And he was so happy. And then he said, "Oh," he said, "do you think you could get that signed for me? Would Baba sign it for me?" I said, "What? I don't see any problem whatsoever." And I took the photo and I went back with my pen out, and I said, "Swami, would you sign this for the engineer?" Swami said, "Go sit down." Oh my God, what did I do wrong? How is it possible that Swami would tell me that? I mean, Swami's my best friend. And then here he's telling me to go sit down? He doesn't want to sign the photo for this guy? And then I get back and I sit down, then it dawned on me. You know, here's this guy, he's got 2 feet, he can get up, he can go ask for the signature. How can I be an intermediary for this guy? And you see, this is, I mean, he taught me, but this is something that we all have to remember, that nobody's going to come to you and say they've got some kind of a message from Sai Baba that you should go jump off a bridge, or that you should loan them money, or that you should do this or that. Swami doesn't work that way in any way, shape, or form. It's heart to heart. And every single one of us have this right, we have this ability to communicate directly with Sai. And it's just a question that we've got to work at it, but we can do it. And we have it. He's there for us. So remember that. Don't do what I tried to do. Then tell you another. This is really a good story from the standpoint. I want you to remember this as to like the tests that Swami will give us. And he's still giving us tests, but this happened to be a direct one. In about 1999, there was to be a World Education Conference in Prashanti, and Dr. Jumsai, who some of you may know, was organizing this, and he'd also gotten UNESCO to be a part of this thing in the beginning, and then later they dropped out. but we were told that this is a big opportunity to invite the ministers of education from your different countries to come to this conference and know about the education and the human values program and see the university and the schools and so on. And so at that time we also were having a lot of trouble in Cuba because the government in Cuba had closed the Psi Center there and made the coordinator sign a paper that he wouldn't have any more meetings, and that they confiscated the Psi books, and they even took the photos off the wall. And so I was thinking, well, if I invite the Minister of Education from Cuba to this conference, then she's on this central committee and she'll talk to Fidel, and then maybe they'll allow us to continue having meetings in Cuba. So I asked Swami, I said, Swami, can I go to Cuba and invite the Minister of Education to this education conference? And Swami said, oh yes, good idea. And so then I said, well, when should we go? And then he pretended to be thinking a little bit, and he says, well, go at the end of the year. And he says, I'll be with you. And then I thought, well, that's kind of strange because you're always with me anyway, but okay. So then I went back and I called the minister 2 or 3 times, and we finally set up a date for the 18th of December because she was going out for the holidays, the Christmas holidays. And so Rosie and I had reservations to leave on the 16th of December. And just 3 or 4 days before our departure, there was a little boy who was on one of these boats that was leaving Cuba that tipped over, and his mother was drowned. She was on the boat, and he was picked up by the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, and he was taken to Miami, and apparently his grandparents were there, and he was united with his grandparents. But then there occurred this tremendous dialogue between Fidel Castro and Bush about this little boy, because the father was still in Cuba. And Fidel says, you know, this boy, his name was Ilian. We want Ilian back here in Cuba because his father's here. And Bush said, no, I'm not going to give him back. We're going to have him here with his grandparents. And they were back and forth, and Fidel was still saying that if he got his hands on some gringo, he was going to, on some, you know, American, he would make an exchange for the little boy and like that. And so here I was, at that time I didn't have a Salvadorian passport. Now I'm an El Salvadorian as well as a US citizen, and I have both passports. But I was there with my US passport. I was going with my US passport, and I'd been to Cuba a couple of other times, but illegally because it wasn't permitted for US citizens to travel to Cuba. And so I was in this dilemma, well, what is going to happen if I go to Cuba? And I can just see, you know, Rosita, you know, passing food through the rails to me inside the jail or something, and, or Vibhuti to try to console me. And, or, you know, the US government would completely disown me or not help me if I was thrown in jail by Castro. And so I tried to get a hold of Swami. I called Chakravarti in the ashram, and I couldn't get a hold of him. I couldn't get through to Swami to try to find out whether I should go or not. And so finally, right at the end, we decided not to travel. So we didn't go to Cuba. And then when I went to India again shortly afterwards, and I told Swami, I said, Swami, we didn't go to Cuba. And so then he said, oh, no, don't go to Cuba. No, Fidel's a bad guy. And he spent about 15 minutes telling me all about Fidel. But Swami wouldn't say, hey, you had a chance to receive my grace and you didn't take it. He just says, oh, no, don't go. Now, just a couple of days before, I had this interview with Swami asking him for permission to go to Cuba. He gave a talk to the students in the Institute for Higher Learning. I wasn't at the talk and I didn't know about it until later. If I had known about it, maybe I would have gone to Cuba. But this story, Swami told this story to the students. And he said when he was a young boy, before Prashanti had been built and so on, he said there was a family from Bangalore that was very much devoted to him. And they had two boys that were just about Swami's age. And this family would come and they would live under a tree. And these two boys and the family, I mean, they would do any kind of service they could, gather firewood or sweep the compound and so on. Very, very devoted to Swami. And this particular year, Swami was telling a story to the students. He said he told the family they had to go back to Bangalore because the rainy season was coming and they were just under a tree. They were going to get all wet. They couldn't stay there. And so reluctantly they went back to Bangalore. And this is just shortly after the Second World War. I think it's around 1950 or so when this takes place. And so the family goes to Bangalore, and they had an older daughter who had married an Indian boy, but he had been sent to Germany in the Second World War, and they were in Berlin. And they had two children. And there was a bombing raid in Berlin, and the school of the children was destroyed in the bombing in Canada, and they took her out of there. And Swami's telling this story to the students. And then in Canada, she met some fella, but it didn't work out. And then she went, I think, to Malaysia, met somebody else and didn't work out. And now she was back in Bangalore to see her family. And of course, when she comes into the family and sees her parents and so on, they tell her, oh, you've got to come and see Sai Baba. God is alive on earth, and come with us. Well, this girl, she's kind of worldly, you know. I mean, she's been around. And the idea that God is on earth, she's not so sure about that one. But anyway, to humor her parents, she goes to Prashanti with them. And they get to Prashanti, and they're there for 3 days. And during the 3 days, Swami didn't talk to them. I mean, you can imagine, there's nobody there hardly, and they're just in the old compound, you know, but Swami didn't say a word until the last day they're leaving, because they have to go back because of the rains. And Swami says to this daughter, he says, go to Chennai, go to Madras. And that's all he said. And they went back to Bangalore. So then the parents start and they say, when are you going to Madras? She says, what? What are you talking about? Well, Sai Baba said you should go to Madras. I know, but I've come to see you. I don't know anybody in Madras. Well, what do I go to Madras for? No, but he's God. And he told you to go to Madras. You have to go to Madras. No, no way. See, I don't know anybody. And so then the mother, finally, she says to her daughter, if you never do anything for me in your life, please go to Madras. And so, putting it that way, the daughter thought, well, okay. So they went down to the train station, they bought her ticket on the train, and she goes to Madras. She gets off the train in Madras on the platform, looks around, and she sees the window where they sell the tickets. And well, I've been to Madras, so she goes over and she buys a ticket, gets on the same train and back towards Bangalore. And in the train, she's in a compartment, and there's a guy sitting in there with a couple of kids, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he offers her a cigarette. So she starts smoking a cigarette. And so then the guy, they're just making conversation. The guy says, well, where are you staying in Bangalore? And she says, oh, I'm in the military complex, because her husband was in the army. And so then he says, well, by any chance, do you know a lady there by the name of Emily? And then she says, well, I'm Emily. And then they look at each other, and it was her husband and her two children from Germany. And so then you can imagine hugging each other, screaming, shouting. They couldn't believe it. And then Swami said to the students, he said, you know, he said, when I tell you something, if you do it, something will happen. You'll experience my grace. And if you don't, well, he said, yeah, nothing might happen or something bad might happen, but you should always do what I say. So then, if I had heard that, I'm sure I might have gone to Cuba. Well, once the Swami told us, he said, I'm going to give you a house. And I don't know, some people would probably say, oh Swami, when, where, under what circumstances? At that time we had a nice house. We had a size center in our home, and although there was a guerrilla war going on in El Salvador at that time, and but I didn't ask Swami. I didn't say when, where, how, what, under what circumstances, and so on. Just thought, well, thank you, Swami, thank you. And then, but then the mind starts, you know, and after the interview, then, well, I wonder if there's going to be an earthquake and maybe my house is going to fall down and then he's somehow going to give me another house. Or maybe the guerrillas are going to win the war and then they'll confiscate my home and then he's going to give me another house. Or maybe he's talking about these little houses in Whitefield here in the back, you know, where he gives the VIPs, he gives them a house, and maybe it's one of those. Or, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm supposed to move to another country and he's going to give me a house there, you know. And this went on, you know, this dialogue, mental dialogue, went on for 18 years. I mean, you talk about being stupid. Waiting for the house, you know. And then all of a sudden, one day, I thought, well, you know, what if Swami's talking about some kind of a spiritual house instead of a brick and mortar thing? And then I remembered, you know, in the human values, how we use this, we make this house that's got the foundation of self-confidence, and the walls, one wall is the self-satisfaction, and the other wall is the self-sacrifice, and then the roof is self-realization. Might Swami have been talking about that kind of a house? Oh, wow. And that's like a promise of something really spiritual, something really big, much better than a brick and mortar house. So anyway, you have to be very, very careful about how you interpret Swami, because he doesn't always talk like other people, you know. And so this was a real interesting one. But then also, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I'll repeat the story because Gita was telling us also about how Swami is so great of cutting your ego down to zero. And really, if you look at it, Swami was the teacher of teachers of how to reduce your ego, just, you know, pulverize it and grind it up to nothing. Well, in one interview he told Rosie, and he says, I'm going to give you plane tickets, free plane tickets. Oh, thank you, Swami. Well, wonderful, plane tickets. Wow. And so then, of course, every year when we're getting ready to go to India, we wait until the last minute. You're thinking, you know, maybe Swami's we're going to win the lottery or something, and then we'll be able to have the free plane tickets, or maybe somebody's going to invite us and they're going to pay our way, or who knows, you know, but nothing happened. But then one year when I was asking Swami, I said, well, Swami, when should we come back? And he says, oh, come for Kodi Canal. And so that meant in early April. So, oh good, okay, so we came in April. And then every day Swami would come out on the veranda and he was talking to me and he was joking with me. And I was like the only person, I was the only person on the veranda, which, I mean, it was very unusual, because Swami would say, you know, when did you come? Or he would, you know, always very polite, but he never made you the center of the conversation every day. And even one day he went around the veranda and he was telling all the men, he says, wife is knife, wife is knife. And he comes to me and says, wife is wisdom. And of course, I made the mistake, I told Rosie that. And I haven't heard the end of it. But, I mean, this kind of thing was going on. One day he says, I'm taller than your wife. He says, I'm 5'3", and she's only 5'1" or 5'2". But, so all my friends on the veranda, they were saying, oh, Swami's going to invite you to Kodi Canal. And then one day, they passed me a note, Swami's leaving tomorrow, and get ready. And I thought, oh, the free plane tickets. Ahí viene la cosa, no? Yes, this is a sure thing. Now it's almost, a done deal. And that night I was walking back to the room, and Saroj from the Western Canteen, she comes up to me. We never talk to the ladies. I hardly even know her. And she comes up to me and she says, when my husband was alive, she said, one night we went in our room and there was a knock on the door. And it was somebody from the office, a Sevadal. And he said, here's 2 plane tickets to go with Swami tomorrow on the plane. But don't tell anybody and just be over at the Mandir at 5 o'clock in the morning. And what's she telling this for, And so then I go back to the room and I tell Rosie, listen, we're going to leave the door open all night tonight because if somebody comes from the office, we want to hear them when they knock, Well, the night went by, Swami left at 5 in the morning. We didn't have any plane tickets or any notice at all. We didn't even have a taxi. So of course it took us forever and a day to get out of there. And then we get to Kodi Canal. And in Kodi Canal, as I mentioned yesterday also, I used to have the privilege of going into his house at night and listening to the stories and everything. And, so it was sort of a given that, you just walk in. But they changed the $7 at the gate, and this guy, he wasn't having any of that, and he said, no, you stand out here. I said, well, here's my card, and he didn't even send it up to the house. And I spent 3 days out in the street waiting to get in for the darshans. And then one morning, Anil Kumar was out taking his exercise on the lake, and he saw me in the line out there. He said, what are you doing out here? And he grabs me and he pulls me into the house. But during those 3 days, my ego had gone down to, I think, -1 or something if you have a scale of 1 to 10. Because, and then of course Swami had set me up for all of this by making me think that I was, the favorite or something. And so I had to laugh yesterday when I was listening to Gita's story also, that how he had cut her down to size as it was. And Swami was just a master at putting us in our places. Well, also, when Swami would interchange with us, talk to us about things, many times you would think that he was saying something about something mundane or just common, but it wasn't. It was, he was talking about something spiritual. And so you had to convert what you were hearing into a spiritual lesson. Now, I can remember one time we were in Kodi Canal, and everybody was helping to dig out the side of the hill because the bhajan hall that they made originally was too small. And so digging out the side of the hill, and we were passing the dirt and baskets over to make a fill in front so that they could have a larger area for the darshan in front also. And one day Swami comes up and he asked me, he says, how many feet? And the feet, I thought he was referring to the wall, from the wall over to where we had dug, and how much out. And so I said, well, Swami, I can get a tape measure and we'll measure it. But he didn't say anything, he just kept walking. And then, after the work time, I was talking to a friend of mine and he said, well, when he was digging, Swami told him to dig deeper. And so then we started thinking about, well, what is how many feet? What does that really mean? And it means how many attachments do you have? And so if you're thinking about your family, or you're thinking about your children, you're thinking about this worldly life that you've created for yourself, or are you really thinking about the divine? Or if you have to dig deeper, are you, when you're in your meditation, are you looking inside, or is your mind filled with worldly things? So this was a good lesson. And in Kodaikanal, I had many experiences. I was fortunate to go 6 different times to Kodi with Swami. And so the first time was in 1984, and we were staying in, well, we had an interesting experience when we left the airport. That was the flight that I was on with Swami. I was with 4 other people in a taxi, other devotees, and we were going up the hill. And while we were on the highway, there were 2 boys on a bicycle, and they fell off the bicycle in front of the taxi. He did everything he could to stop, but he hit them, and they were bleeding and lying out on the highway. And a bunch of people gathered around, and it was kind of tense for a minute, but we took out vibhuti, and we were putting vibhuti on their wounds. And when the people saw the vibhuti, they calmed down, and they said, oh, vibhuti, vibhuti. And we put the 2 boys in the taxi, and we left the 3 of the passengers out on the road, and 2 of us took these boys to a hospital. It was a little hospital out in the middle of nowhere. And the doctor was, there was a doctor on duty. It was in the morning, still I think around 11 or 11:30. And so we were in this little room, and the doctor was cleaning the wounds, and they weren't that serious, but they had to stitch. One was the leg, one was the forehead. And all of a sudden, there were about 3 cars that pulled up in the parking lot, and a whole bunch of people got out. The family, the parents, the uncles, the aunts, the neighbors, and all these people, it must have been about 30 people, and they all crammed into the little operating room. I don't know how the doctor was able to stitch these boys up, but everybody wanted to see what he was doing. And but anyway, the doctor took care of the wounds. And so then we went out, and our taxi was gone. And where's the taxi? Where's the taxi driver? And he said, oh, he's in jail. Well, when you have an accident in India, if somebody's injured, you go to jail. And so then, well, we want to get our suitcases from the taxi, but the taxi's in jail too. Well, what do you mean? And so the taxi was in the police compound, and they wouldn't let us take the suitcases because they were evidence. Supposedly, you know, they wanted a bribe. And so we had to talk for about an hour to get our suitcases out of there without paying anything. And then get another taxi and go to Kodi. Well, when we got to Kodaikanal, we ran into the other 3 devotees that we left on the highway. And they'd been picked up by other devotees. And they were driving around looking for a hotel. Because when Swami, I think in those days there wasn't more than a couple of hotels in Kodaikanal, or maybe 3 or 4, but they were always full when Swami would go there. And so they'd been driving around and they hadn't found anything, and then we joined them in the car, and we also went around looking. And it was getting to be dark, you know, at this time, and there was a lady and her son that were standing out by the gate of their house. And we stopped and we asked them if they knew if there was a hotel or something around there. And they asked us if we were Bhava devotees, and we said yes. And then the lady says, well, I have another house here that I rent out. And so, oh yeah, we're interested. So we all got down and we went in, and we're going into the house, and there's a white chair fairly close to the door, and she says, oh, when Swami came last year, he sat in this chair. Om Sai Ram. And we had hit pay dirt, you know, and it turns out that this lady was not only a good devotee, but she was also a distant relative of Swami. So the last name Raju, and the son, they were very, very nice. So we all sat down and we had bhajans and celebrated. And then while we were staying there, the lady asked Swami if she could cook for him. And Swami said, oh yes. And so every day she would prepare food, and she would sing the Ramayana, or and then she would explain to us what she was singing, and we would cut the vegetables and help her, and then we would take the tiffin carriers over to Swami's house. At that time, Swami was staying with Srinivas in Srinivasan's house, V. Srinivas from Madras. And the darshans were in the garden because there was only maybe 50 men and 50 ladies during the week, and then on the weekends a lot of people would come up from Madurai and the towns around, and maybe we'd have maybe 200, 300 people, but not very many. And so it was a beautiful time. Then the lady also, she was asking Swami if he would visit her home. And he said, oh yes. And then every day we'd run back and after the morning darshan and clean the house and prepare fruits and so on for Swami's visit, and cut flowers in the garden until there wasn't any more flowers, because every day Swami said he would come and then he didn't. Until the very last day when he was leaving, and then he really did come. And the ladies put saris down on the path, and when he walked into the house, he walked on their saris. And when he came in, and we had a group interview, and everybody was completely happy with this opportunity that we had to have this interview with Swami. Well, the next year was 1985, and so Rosie wanted to come with me because that year, for some reason, she hadn't traveled with me to India in April. And so she came, and also her sister came. And when we left Whitefield, we made sure that the driver, he said he knew how to get to Cody Canal, but we got to Salem and he got lost, and he was insisting that he was on the right road, and he got into a dirt road that ended in a cow trail, and he had to turn around and go back. And so we got to Cody Canal. It was very late. It was almost midnight, and we had trouble finding a place, and finally we found a place where I had to sleep with my feet in the bathroom, and my wife and her sister slept in the bed. And then we woke up early in the morning, you know, and we hardly slept, and we're all, you know, just barely dragging over for darshan at Srinivasan's house. And Swami calls us for interview. And so he takes us into his bedroom, which was over the garage, and he sits on the bed, and we sit on the floor around his feet. I mean, this is how it was in those days. Everything was so spontaneous and so beautiful, and that the things that he would, I mean, you know, how do you say? You just felt like he was one of the family. You didn't feel like there was any separation or any awe or any. You were afraid to ask him anything or nothing, because it was just like, he's your dad, you know, or he's your best friend. So anyway, we had this unusual interview very early in the morning, and he let me sing a bhajan. In the afternoons we sang bhajans in the rose garden there, and so I was a bhajan leader, which was unusual for me, but I had that opportunity to sing. And then also, when I was going to Cody Canal and I had the opportunity to go into his house and be inside, the things that we would listen to and see and hear were just wonderful. I mean, the experiences that we had. I know one night Swami said, Shirdi Baba was the food gatherer, and Satya Sai is the food cooker, and Prema Sai is going to serve the food. And who's the food, no? So then Narasimhan was the editor of Sanatana Sarati at that time, and he happened to be there that night. And he said, Swami, does that mean that all of us were with you with Shirdi? And then Swami said, just worry about yourself. And many times when we would ask something about someone else, that's the kind of answer we would get when we were curious about someone. I know I asked him about this Vasanta Sai, and he said, just worry about yourself. So, but then in these evening sessions, Swami would, every single night, he would tell us stories from either the Krishna avatar or Rama avatar, but he would tell them in such a way that you could tell that he was telling his own story. It was the little details that he would tell. And then the materializations. One night, he materialized the ring that Kamsa had given to Jarasandha. Excuse me, it's the other way around. That Jarasandha had given to Kamsa. Jarasandha was the father-in-law of Kamsa. And Jarasandha gave Kamsa this ring so that he could go out and steal more territory for their kingdom. And while he was wearing this ring, he couldn't be defeated. So then Swami passed the ring around to all of us, and it was enormous. I mean, my thumb would go into it like it was, it was bigger around than my thumb. And supposedly he used this on his little finger. The ring had a blue stone, no, it had a green stone, excuse me, a green stone, something like this one, but inside it was blue, and it had this deep blue, like, when you're in the ocean and you can see the ocean, that it was a beautiful clear blue inside this ring. And so we all, tried the ring and had it with ours, and then Swami blew on it and it disappeared. And then another night, talking about the marriage of Satyabhama to Krishna. And he materialized the gift that Satyabhama's father had given her for the wedding, which was a swan, but it was a gold swan in the form of a basket. And the neck of the swan formed the little handle to the basket with diamonds around the top of the handle, or the neck of the swan. The most beautiful piece of jewelry that I've ever seen. I mean, these things are they were just exquisite beyond words. And then Swami, after everybody had seen the swan, he put the swan on his chair. He didn't blow on it and make it disappear. And then when we left that night, it was still on the table next to his chair. So in the morning we asked the students, well, what happened to the swan? And they said, well, Swami had taken it into his room, but he didn't make it disappear by blowing on it or anything. Sometimes he would give these gifts to people too. But I know many of you have heard or seen and experienced some of the things that Swami had materialized there in Kodaikanal at night. Incredible things. So, what is the big lesson for me in having had these experiences of sight? And I feel that all of these things that happened, of course, were as a result of karma, past karma, good karma. And that was very, very fortunate. Swami told me about my last life, and I was with him in Shirdi. and that this was something that permitted me in this avatar to have this kind of a relationship because there was, I guess, this love and this desire to be close that I had, and that everything that he did, that all these things that he permitted me to see and experiment and so on, and then after he told us that we could stay there, I didn't actually ask him. It was a very funny exchange because I had commented to Mike Hollinger, who you people know. Mike said to me, he said, I've asked Swami 3 times if I could stay here in Prashanti, and he's told me later, or he hasn't given me an answer. And I told Mike, I said, well, if Swami asked me, it'd take me about 1 minute to give him an answer that I'd stay here, And then Swami came out of his room after Mike and I had this little conversation on the veranda, and he came up to me and then he asked me when I was leaving, and I said, well, I gave him a date, and then he said, well, coming and going, coming and going. He said, not good, not good, don't waste money. And so then, he keeps going, and so then you say, well, what does he mean? Is he throwing me out? No, it's an invitation. And it's an invitation because he doesn't want you to come and go and come and go, but at that time, because I'm a zone chairman, I'm there for meetings in Guru Purnima, I'm there for meetings in how do you say, birthday, and then also Christmas committee activities. So he's inviting to stay. And so this is what we've done ever since. We had this beautiful opportunity to stay with him, stay close to him for 6 months every year since 2006. And then of course after Swami left his body and Dr. Reddy said, well, now you don't have to go every year for 6 months. I said, well, yeah, but when Swami tells me, you see, because when Swami tells you something, you don't know when it's going to happen, but you have to have faith that it will happen. And so it's just like the problem I have with my eyes. I have this strabismo, no? And it's very easy, I guess, to have an operation and you can get your eyes fixed. But when this first started happening, we were in an interview and Rosie said, hey, Swami, should John get his eyes operated on? And Swami says, no, I'll fix them. And so, he said, he'll fix it. So you have to believe that. You have to believe that that will happen at some point. And maybe it's not in your time, maybe it's in my next lifetime, I don't know. But so I can't get an operation because he's going to fix it. So this is what has happened to me in a nutshell, that he's made my life such a beautiful experience, and hopefully that someday that this house that he said he was going to give me with the roof of self-realization will materialize. This is something that can happen to all of us if we have that faith and dedication, because this SDSC that's come is just something beyond our comprehension. He's just everything that everybody could ever imagine. He's the teacher of teachers. He's God in human form. He's the descent of a complete avatar with all powers. And I thank you for listening. Sai Ram.
us this evening with Dr. John Behner. Thank you, Swami, for having you devotee speak, and also we thank Rose for also coming here to the center on a very short notice. I would like to give a small token of our appreciation to both Rose and Mr. John. I'd like to invite Sister Geeta Goyal to come and give a small token of appreciation to Sister Rose. I would request Brother Rajan Goyal to give a small token of appreciation to Brother John.
As I mentioned at the retreat, believe me, Rosita, she is also the driving force behind. He does a lot of civil activities, especially in the international disaster relief. But she is, her devotion is phenomenal. So, this is Swami. Swami has materialized Durga, the pendant for her. So she is the Shakti Rupa. And when they converse, and you can see, that she's the motivating factor behind. So, like for every man, there is a driving force behind the scene, And so we wanted to acknowledge her also. That is tremendous. It's an honor meeting them.
I'll request Brother John to come and give Aarti to Swami, to the closing prayers.
जगदीश हरे स्वामी साई हरे भक्तना संरक्षक भक्तना संरक्षक पति महेश्वर ओम जय जगदीश हरे शशिवदना श्रीकरा सर्वा प्राणपते स्वामी सर्वा प्राणपते आश्रित कल्पलदीगा आश्रित कल्पलदीगा आबद्धांगवा ओम जय जगदीश हरे माता पिता गुरुदेव मरियन्तयु नीवे स्वामी मरियन्तयु नीवे नाद ब्रह्म जगन्नाथा नाद ब्रह्म जगन्नाथा नागेन्द्र शयना ओम जय जगदीश हरे ओंकार रूप जय शिव साई महादेवा सच साई महादेवा मंगल आरती अंधको मंगल आरती मंदर गिरिधारी ओम जय जगदीश हरे नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साईं बाबा जी की
जय।
शिरडी साईं महाराज की
जय।
साईं माता जी की
जय।